Okay. We have two presenters today. Jasmine Garland is a WVU alum with previous admissions and orientation experience. Currently, she serves as a manager within the Mountaineer Hub and is also on the WVU's Financial Wellbeing Priority Action Team. Our second speaker is Amy Pridemore, who is a service assistant professor and director of the Center for Financial Literacy and Education at the Chambers College of Business and Economics. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the time over to Jasmine.
Thank you so much. I'll go ahead and share my screen. And you should be able to see, hold on. There you go. You should be able to see my screen on here. So as mentioned, yes, my name is Jasmine Gonlin. I actually graduated from the Chambers College of Business and Economics in 2015, but I do work over at the Mountaineer Hub. I am a student service manager over there, and I really appreciate everyone who's taken the time out of their afternoon to join this presentation. So this afternoon, we're going to discuss how financial aid specifically fits into your overall financial plan, why you may want to consider applying for federal financial aid, how to borrow responsibly, your loan repayment options, and then I'll hand it over to Amy to discuss establishing a financial direction. So first, the FAFSA. The first thing to know is, what is the FAFSA? So the FAFSA stands for free application for federal student aid. And the reason why I highlight the word free is that you may see scholarship or aid opportunities that have application fees associated with them. Beware of scams here. You'll want to do your due diligence. For federal aid, there is never a fee to apply for this. Who can complete the FAFSA? Anyone, honestly, can complete the FAFSA. Our director completes it just so he can see what changes have occurred over the past year. But we'll only process it. My office will only process it actually if you're an active student. So in order to complete the FAFSA, you will need your FSA ID or your Federal Student Aid ID to log in and to complete the application. As a graduate or professional student, you would automatically be considered independent, meaning we do not need parental information on the FAFSA, and you should be able to complete the form in about half the time as a dependent undergraduate student. So why would you maybe consider submitting the FAFSA? What would be the incentives for that? This is the only way to qualify for federal financial aid. So usually for graduate and professional students, that means an unsubsidized loan offer. But since this past year has been unlike anything we've ever experienced, students with a valid FAFSA on file also have the ability to qualify for additional funding directly related to the pandemic. So while higher amounts were awarded to students receiving the federal Pell Grant, there was an opportunity, and some of you may have received emails about it this week. Actually, we were awarding additional grant funds in the amount of $750 just for students who have completed a FAFSA and had a valid FAFSA on file. So that's something to note. Currently, we are within the 2020-21 aid year, and the fall 2021 semester is covered under the 21-22 FAFSA. Just in case you are looking to access that online, you'll just visit studentaid.gov, and then WVU's school code is 003827. You'll add that on the application. Now we'll move into the topic of responsible borrowing. So once you've completed your FAFSA and you have that offer available to you. Of course, the best way to reduce your overall debt is by borrowing less to begin with. As a graduate or a professional student, If you do have a valid FAFSA, you will automatically be offered up to $20,500 in a federal unsubsidized loan annually. Now for dentistry and medicine students, it's $40,500, and you can see that these amounts can compound very quickly. So you want to keep in mind that the unsubsidized loan is a loan that accrues interest while you're enrolled in school. It does not need to be repaid while you're enrolled, but it still accrues interest. You'll see the total cumulative borrowing limits on this screen here. On top of that, students can also apply for a PLUS loan. So while you do have many options to cover your bill, you want to keep in mind that you should only borrow what you really need. So we do create budgets for students that you can view in the STAR system under your financial aid tab. If you have borrowed more than what you need, you do have the ability to return it to our office with 0 interest as long as it's within that year. So for example, if you borrowed $10,000 in the unsubsidized loan for this spring, but you really only needed $6,000, you can return that $4,000 to us and there's no interest. Okay. So on this next slide here, I've listed a few resources, including the federal student aid site, which will list the current interest rates on your federal loans, as well as information about how interest is calculated. And then you'll also see our private loan page here as well, if that would be of help to you. So now we're going to briefly jump into some repayment options. And what I've done is I've just listed the 6 main repayment options on this slide for you. I'm not going to go into each of these too in depth, but feel free to take a picture or screenshot for yourself. Really, the main thing to note here is that you have options. So this standard repayment plan is typically going to have your loans paid, your federal loans paid within 10-year period, and will usually be less expensive over time because you'll end up paying less interest overall. However, if you're planning to seek public service loan forgiveness, I know we have a few teachers in the group, another repayment option may work better for you and your personal long-term saving goals. I should also note that only 32 borrowers have actually ever qualified for full forgiveness using the income driven payment plan. So you may just want to do a little bit more research with your loan servicer before jumping into a repayment plan. So a couple of tips and options when it is time for you to enter repayment. Biggest key here is communication. So you'll want to work with your lender early and often. You don't want to graduate blindsided about your debt. You'll want to contact your lender now to determine how much you've already borrowed and get ahead of your repayments. If you're not sure who your lender is, you can check the National Student Loan Data System, or NSLDS, and I have the link provided for that in the next slide. Also, it is important to note that all federal loans are in administrative forbearance and have a 0 interest rate right now through September 30th, 2021. So if you've borrowed loans for your undergraduate program, if they're unsubsidized, typically they would be accruing interest right now, but all previously dispersed federal loans are in administrative forbearance, meaning no payment is currently due. So what I would suggest during this time, and actually what I'm doing, is to put whatever you would have been paying monthly towards your loans into a high yield savings account. This way, if there is loan cancellation by the fall, then you can reap those benefits without having any lost potential savings. And if there's not, then you can put those funds towards your loan repayments while yielding a bit more than if you had been paying your loans down during that same time period. So speaking of cancellation and loan forgiveness, I couldn't have this presentation without mentioning the $1.9 trillion stimulus plan that was passed last week. So typically, loan cancellation is considered as income and thus would increase the borrower's income taxes for the following year. So for example, if $10,000 in federal loans were forgiven, and if you were in the 20% tax bracket, that would actually result in an additional $2,000 in taxes owed for the next year. However, the stimulus plan that was signed last week includes a very important measure that would exempt student loan forgiveness from taxation at least through January 1st, 2026. The reason why I mention this is because it's very important to stay up on the federal regulations. There's a lot that's going on right now, especially in terms of loan forgiveness and loan repayment. So just be aware of that as you start to enter repayment on your federal loans. As promised, I have information here for the National Student Loan Data System, where you can find your federal lender and also how much that you owe. There are also resources for more in-depth explanation of the repayment process and description of the various payment plans listed here as well. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to contact me. You can email me. You can also contact the Mountaineer Hub directly. Our website and phone number is provided there. We take phone calls from 8:15 to 4:45 from Monday through Friday. And thank you all for your time and attention this afternoon. With that, I'll hand it over to Amy to talk about establishing.
Before you do that, Jasmine, there's a question in chat to me. Are there any grants for graduate students?
So there is our federal CRRSAA grant that was awarded to graduate students this week if they had a valid FAFSA on file. Now the EFC, or the expected family contribution, would have to be $20,000 or less for that. So there may be grants, but it also depends on your family contribution.
Okay, so that's the only question that I see in chat. So students, feel free to type your question in chat, and you can only write it to me, and I will read the questions at the end to the speakers. Thank you, Jasmine.
Thank you.
Okay, Amy.
Hi everyone, I'm going to share my screen next. Give me 1 second. Does not want to work for me today here. Don't know why. All right, now can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right, my name is Amy Pridemore, and I am the director of the Center for Financial Literacy and Education at the College of Business and Economics, the Chambers College of Business and Economics. And I have been in my position for a little over a month now. I started in February, so I'm pretty new to this. But today we're going to talk a little bit about what your personal financial plan would be, how you can meet some of your goals, and how we get there. If you have any questions, like Betty said, just put them in the chat and she will read them out to me. So financial standing, 76% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. 55% of Americans did not save a penny last year. 97% of baby boomers have not saved enough to retire. $1 trillion in credit card debt outstanding, $1.2 trillion in student loans outstanding, and there's $11.6 trillion in total consumer debt outstanding. So basically what the Center for Financial Literacy and Education does is we try to get in front of students and even children before they get into college and they start making these adult decisions about their future and their financial wellness. So as we all know, it's much easier to spend than it is to save. Personal financial planning is an ongoing process, It obviously changes as your life cycle changes as well. You want to manage and control your finances with a personal financial plan to help you achieve your financial and lifestyle goals. So this is a little chart about the life cycle phases and characteristics. Basically, most of you are probably in this asset accumulation phase, and this is where you are going to accumulate most of the assets. You know, you're going to accumulate vehicles and probably a home, and you're going to start retirement accounts and all of those other things that you buy when you first get a job and start what I like to say the real world per se. When you start hitting between 40 and 60, you're in the conservation protection phase. So basically, you want to conserve and protect those assets. You want to make sure that you are paying your mortgage down and that you're getting things paid off, your car's paid off, and that sort of thing. And then, and you're continuing to contribute to your retirement. And then you're going to get down here around 55 to the end of your life expectancy. You're going to be in the distribution and gifting phase. So that's where your retirement assets are going to start making distributions to you. Hopefully your investments are going to be lucrative at that point. And hopefully that you've set yourself up for enough wealth that you have the ability to give back to others. So there are different types of debt, and like we like to say, not all bad debt, or not all debt is bad debt. So this list kind of goes from good debt to not so great debt, and we're going to go through these together. But student loans, you want to look at the expected benefit period versus the repayment period. So with student loans, you get an education, and that education is going to last for your lifetime. So your expected benefit period is the lifetime. But as Jasmine stated earlier, the common repayment period for that is normally around 10 to 15 years. So the benefit will much longer outweigh the repayment period. A mortgage is also a very good investment or a good debt per se. You know, it provides shelter. You live there every day. Your expected benefit period could be 40 years, depending on how long you're in the house. But the common repayment period is 15 to 30 years, depending on what type of mortgage you would get. Auto loans are kind of middle of the road. Debt, they're used for transportation, and your expected benefit period is 3 to 10 years, depending on how long you like to keep cars. And again, this is all on personal preference. So, you know, my husband and I like to keep our cars until we can't run them anymore. So we keep them for 10 plus years. But then I have friends who like to get a new car every few years, excuse me. So they have a much shorter expected benefit period, but your common repayment period for those is anywhere from 3 to 5 years. You can get bank loans for various things, whether you want to buy a boat or an RV, or you need to pay something off. You have a big expense that you want to pay. So bank loans start to get down here in this not so great debt, and then you have credit cards. Basically, credit cards are used for consumption, and depending, you know, they're all very high interest cards. And the expected benefit period are usually pretty short, you know, especially if you're going to use it for shopping or, you know, eating out or something like that. But it could take 30 days to a year or more, depending on how much you rack up on that credit card and how much the interest is and how soon you can pay it off. So then you want to look at some financial goals and how long it's going to take you. Short-term goals are normally less than 2 years. This could be something such as saving for a down payment on an automobile. You could have an intermediate time frame, which is 2 to 10 years. This could be things like funding your child's education or saving for a down payment on a home. And then long-term is greater than 10 years. And these are things like saving for retirement. So when you would save for a purchase of a home, that could usually take you 2 to 5 years. Most mortgage companies require that you have 20% down when you go and get a mortgage. And if you don't have that 20% down, then you could have what's called private mortgage insurance or PMI for the bank to ensure that they'll be able to collect on that loan. So when you're saving for this, you want to put them in conservative investments. You don't want to do any risky investments that you could lose everything and then not be able to purchase your home. Another goal would be funding your children's education. Tuition costs increase by 5 to 7% annually. And, you know, a funny story about this is that Dr. Naomi Boyd was my teacher for financial planning whenever I was in school. And she told us the story about tuition costs and how much it was going to be at that point for me to have my children, put my children through college. And I looked at her and I said, I always wanted 3 children until this point, and now I only want 2 because I don't want to have to pay for the education costs for 3 kids because it can get to be so astronomical. And then finally, planning for retirement. Social Security is not sufficient in most cases, and you know there's been a lot of talk about Social Security is even going to be around by the time we're ready to retire. So at this point, each individual needs to have their own retirement plan and additionally fund their retirement to expect that they could spend anywhere from 10 to 20 years in retirement. So you need to distinguish a want from a need and ask the following questions. Is this objective necessary to accomplish the financial mission, and does the law require that this objective be implemented? If the answer to either is yes, the objective is a need, and if the answer to both questions is no, the objective is a want. So if you think about when you're buying a new car, you know, you would like to have a backup camera, but that's not a need, it's a want. You would like to have windows that are power windows, but it's a need, not a want. You could easily have crank windows. So these are all things that you need to sit down and distinguish before you make a major purchase. So the biggest question is, where does all of your money go? You want to sit down and have a plan and a budget, and that requires control. This will help you evaluate your financial health and also develop a plan of action going forward. You want to identify your income and expenses when you create a budget, and all good things are in moderation. You have to think about what expenses you can reduce and also beware of little expenses. I'm really guilty of going to Target and spending $5 and going to a gas station and spending $10 and going to McDonald's and spending another $10. And before I know it, I've spent $100 in a weekend. So all of those little expenses can really add up. And you just need to be really cautious about what you're spending and where your money's going. You also want to try to reduce wasteful spending. So the average yearly income of a household in America is $50,756. And we usually waste about 16% on little expenses. Again, those can be gym memberships, wasted food. I don't know how many of you are like me that, you know, when I clean out my refrigerator, I find so much that I could have eaten and it just went bad before I was able to do that because I forgot that it was in my fridge. Alcohol, coffee, we're all guilty of going to Starbucks, fast food, you know, wasted energy, and credit card interest. So again, if you have $50,000 and you waste 8,000 of it, that only leaves you with 42,000 left. So the way that you need to create a plan is that you first evaluate your financial health. You're going to prepare a personal balance sheet. You're going to determine your net worth and use ratios. We're going to go through all of this as the slides go on as well. You want to define your financial goals, identify for what you're saving for, and figure out how much you need to save for that. Then make a plan of action and implement your plan. But the big kicker down here, step number 5, that you need to review your progress, reevaluate, and revise your plan. If you're anything like me, every time you have a plan, something comes and you need a new tire, or you need new tires for your car, or your air condition goes out and you have to spend that money that you were hoping to put towards your budget or your debt or your savings goals, whatever. And then now you have to put it into fixing your car. So I'm constantly reevaluating and revising where I need to. So you want to use a balance sheet to measure your wealth. This is a snapshot of your financial status at a particular time. So it will be as of a certain day. It will never be over a lifetime, a long period of time. It'll tell you the assets that you own, the debt and liabilities that you've incurred, and then it'll show you your net worth. So this is an example of a personal balance sheet. You're going to list the assets in order of liquidity. So Your most liquid assets are going to be listed first. So those are things like your bank account or your savings account. You're going to then list your investments and your retirement plans, your housing. That's always going to be listed at market value. Automobiles, the same. Other personal property, again, boats, RVs, land, and any other assets that you have. And then that would be the total your total assets that you own. Beneath that, you're going to list your liabilities or debt. So that's what you owe. Any current bills, any credit card debt you pay, your mortgage, your automobile loans, any other debt, the loan that you have on that land or the loan that you have on the boat. And then you're going to get your total debt down here. So then you're going to subtract your total debt minus your assets minus your total debts is going to equal your net worth. And when you first are in that early stage of your life cycle, the asset accumulation phase, your net worth could very well be a negative number. And don't be afraid by that, because as we're going to talk about here coming up, as you start to pay things off and you go through that next life cycle of your life, that net worth should continually get larger. That's our goal. So assets are your possessions, even if you owe money on them. You want to use your assets using the fair market value, meaning how much it's worth today, and that all values must be current. So for instance, my house today is worth more than what I paid for it 4 years ago, because the housing market in Morgantown is really good right now. So when I'm creating my balance sheet, I want to put what my house is worth today. And you can find that on Zillow or any other real estate site. Monetary assets are cash or liquid assets. Investments are a little less liquid than cash are. Retirement plans, these can be things like a 403B through your employer, a 401k, Roth IRAs, traditional IRAs, etc. And any tangible assets are physical assets. So your vehicles, furniture, jewelry, collectibles, instruments, etc. These are all listed as tangible assets. Liabilities are what you owe. So a liability is a debt that must be repaid at some point in the future. Current liabilities must be paid off within the next year, and long-term liabilities come due beyond a year. You only want to list the unpaid balance. So in the case of a mortgage, let's say that you paid $200,000 for your house and you have paid $150,000 on it, you would only list $50,000 remaining. Current bills are listed as your liabilities. So those are your utility bills, your insurance premiums, any credit card balances that you have. And then long-term liabilities are your home, your car, or any student loans. Other loans could be installment loans, bank loans, and insurance policy loans. So as I stated before, your net worth equals your total assets minus your total debt. If your liabilities are greater than your assets, you have a negative net worth and you're insolvent. But again, this is going to be determined based on your place in the financial life cycle. And the goal is that the older you get, the more positive your net worth is. So this is just a little chart about how you compare, the average annual salary for a college graduate is $55,000, and that if your income is at least $180,000, then you're in the top 5% of Americans. And then you can look down here and see what the average net worth is based on how old they are and what their education status is. Next, we're going to talk about an income statement and how you can use that to trace your money. An income statement, we like to think of it as a financial motion picture. So it tells you where you've been and where it has gone over a period of time, not just as of that certain specific time period. Income, it's going to list your incomes and expenditures and show you what your net income is, and it's all based on cash. So it's actually what came in and out of your accounts. So it will be your income minus your expenses over a given time period. This is an example of an income statement, a personal income statement. So you want to take your total income minus your income taxes, and that's your after tax available for living expenditures. In my household, I usually skip the total income and total income taxes portion and actually just go straight to that after tax income available, what my net income is for the month. You're going to take your total housing expenditures. So that's going to include your utility bills. It's going to include your internet, anything that falls in the housing expenditure category. Food is eating out and groceries, clothing and personal care, transportation, recreation, medical, etc. You can read all of those things. So when you get down there, you're going to take your after-tax income minus your total expenses, and that's going to give you what your income available is for savings and investment. This is what you're going to be able to use for saving your savings goals. So where does your money come from? It can come from wages, salary, bonuses, tips, commissions, family income, government payments, whether that's veterans benefits, welfare, or investment income. And you always want to make sure that you subtract federal, state, Social Security taxes from earnings and calculate your take-home pay. This could also be scholarships as well. They could be included as your income or cash flows. And expenditures are where your money goes. Cash transactions may not leave a paper trail. You have to think that when you swipe a debit card, that you can go on and log onto your bank account and see exactly how much you spent and where you spent it at. But when you hand somebody a $5 bill, unless you track that expense, you're not going to know exactly where you spent it. Maybe you're forgetful, or maybe you have a really great brain and you don't have to write it down. But most people would want to keep a paper trail, whether that's a receipt or write it down in a ledger. You can have variable or fixed expenditures. So variable expenditures are going to be things like your water bill per se. Our water bill goes up and down every time it comes. I never know how much the actual bill is going to be. But my fixed expenditures are like my internet bill from Comcast, that it's the same amount every single month. And you want to make sure that you have control over your expenditures. If you notice that you're spending too much in one category, you can either try to cut back and not spend so much, or you can find other ways to cut cost. This is just a little chart of how Americans spend their money. You can see that housing is where they spend the majority of their money. Then next you have transportation, food, personal insurance, etc. So I just think that this is an interesting chart. You want to make sure that you keep good records. Without records, it's really difficult to prepare your taxes. You can track your expenses and know how much and where you're spending. And it's really easy for someone to step in during an emergency and understand your financial situation. A great example of this is that my brother-in-law's dad recently passed away. And in the few days after his passing, he was someone who handled all of the money for their family. My sister-in-law and her other sister-in-law actually had to go in and figure out where the checkbook was, because they had no idea where he had put the checkbook or any of the records. So make sure that you share this information with someone else, whether that's a parent or a spouse or a roommate, someone that you know and that you trust, so that they would know in an emergency where they could find this information. So you want to track your financial dealings. Like I said earlier, if you use credit cards or checks or debit cards, you can track them online. The cash expenditures must be tracked as they occur. And after tracking, you want to record transactions in a ledger, whether that's like the little ledger in your checkbook, or whether that's an app on your phone. There are so many different ways that you can track transactions. And then you want to file and store your records so that they're readily accessible. So finally, you want to create a budget. This is how you're going to evaluate your financial health, is to use the balance sheet and the income statement together to set financial goals and to achieve financial goals. From here, you're going to develop a plan of action and cash budget using the income statement. So that income statement is going to tell you how much money you have left over each month. And then this budget is going to allow you to determine what you want to do with that leftover. You want to monitor your progress using the balance sheet and income statement, and you want to make sure that your expenses don't go over what your income is, and additionally, that your net worth is continuing to increase. So this will allow you to plan for controlling cash inflows and outflows and allocate dollar amounts for different spending categories. There are some people who actually take cash out of the bank and they put them in envelopes, and then they write on the envelope food, gas, coffee, etc., so that they know how much they're allowed to spend. And once that cash is gone, it's gone until they get paid for another time. So this is how you would actually use cash without using a card per se. So again, you want to estimate your after-tax income, you want to estimate your expenses, and then figure out how much you have left for saving and investing. So we always say, just try a cash budget. Put it in place for a month, see what happens. Are you saving more money? Are you finding that you're out in certain categories quicker than what you would expect? It just really puts into perspective where your money is going and how quickly it goes out. There's a lot of studies that say that it's much harder for someone to hand someone a $100 bill, physically hand them. Psychologically, it is much harder for someone to hand someone else a $100 bill than it is for them to swipe their card, because they can see the 100 leaving their hand, but they can't necessarily see it leaving their bank account right away. So you want to compare actual expenditures in each category with the budget amounts at the end of the month and evaluate whether you should change your budget estimates or if you should exert more self-control. And again, we're talking about the envelope system down here. So here's a budget tracker. You can get this on My Finance Lab, and it looks very similar to the income statement that we talked about before, but the main difference is this actual income, the budget and the actual column. So you can see how much you budgeted versus what you actually spend. So the way that you want to build your credit history, because many of you may be starting out and not have any credit, is that you want to establish a steady work record. You want to pay your bills promptly. You want to open a checking account and a savings account. Don't bounce your checks. Don't overdraw your checking account. Apply for a local store credit card and make regular payments on that. You could apply for a small loan using your savings account as collateral, or you could get a cosigner on a loan and pay back the loan as agreed. So in my situation, when I first started college, my mom got me a credit card to continue to build my credit. And then when I graduated, I was ready to go buy my first car, and my parents were able to co-sign on that for me. So I made my loan payments on time all the time, and that way I was able to build up my credit. This is just a little bit about credit cards and what the advantages and disadvantages are. The advantages are that you don't have to carry cash. It creates a record of purchases, and you can consolidate bills into one payment. So think about, you have your utility bills, you have your gas bill, your electric bill, your internet. You could pay all of that on your credit card so that you only have one payment going out of your checking account each month. And you're able to buy whatever items that you need now versus having to wait. Some disadvantages are that there's a high rate of interest, usually anywhere from 20 to 27% on credit cards, that if you don't pay them off each month, that interest accumulates really quickly. You may require additional fees. You could lose track of your spending like we've talked about, and also has an increase of impulse buying. So you want to make sure that you only borrow what you can repay. You want to read and understand credit contracts, pay your debts promptly, notify a creditor if you can't meet the payments that you have to pay. Report and lost or stolen credit cards right away so that other people aren't using them and you're not a victim of identity theft. And you have to be cautious of giving card information over the phone. You also want to protect your credit score. These are the breakdown of what makes up your credit score. The payment history is 35%. The amount owed on your credit is 30%. Any new credit inquiries on your account is 10%. The length of credit history is 15%. So this is why we recommend that you get a credit card right away when you turn 18, but also only use that responsibly. And then your credit max. So you want to make on-time payments, don't abuse them. And, you know, this really affects your future borrowing potential, whether you want to get an auto loan or a mortgage later on. You know, there are so many different things that are built off of your credit score, even rental lease contracts. You know, they want to run your credit score and make sure that you're going to pay your lease each month. Insurance, etc. There's so many things that are driven off of a credit score. So you really want to make sure that that is as good as it can be. I know that many of you asked about investing in and had certain investing questions. We don't necessarily have time for all of those today, but I did just want to show you a chart here that the best thing that you can do is to start investing at a young age, because you can see that if you start investing at age 25, how much your money will grow over the, if you had invested $12,500 by age 25, how much that will grow to. But if you started when you were 55, you clearly wouldn't get as much interest on that. So some good habits are to keep an up-to-date budget, set up an automatic savings plan. You want to establish and maintain your credit, pay off your debts, and this will set yourself up for success. So in summary, you want to use a balance sheet to determine your net wealth, and then you want to use an income statement to determine where your money comes from and goes. And that way you'll be able to have meet your savings goals or investing goals. Make sure that you keep a sound record keeping system and evaluate your budget often. And if you ever need extra help, personal financial planners can help by validating your plan or helping you to develop a new plan. So we have reached the end, and this is the code for the evaluation, but I am happy to take questions while we wait here.
Yeah, Amy, would you leave that slide on the quote, the QR code?
Yes.
Yes, and there's a question from a student. They want to know whether you have any recommendation for any budgeting apps.
There are so many, and it honestly really depends on what you like the best. There is Every Dollar, which is a Dave Ramsey app. There is YNAB, YNAB, which means you need a budget. That's one that I recommend to my students often. I found one called Fudget, FUDGET, that you can put in, and it'll tell you can put in each. I use it for a paycheck budgeter that I put in how much I have remaining each time I get paid, and then I subtract my expenses from there. But YNAB and Every Dollar actually connect directly to your bank account if you wanted to do that. But if you're using a cash envelope system, you could use that Budget. It works a little bit better.
Okay, so here's another question. I'm going to graduate with an enormous amount of student debt with only making about 60,000, and my monthly payments would be like 1,600. Do you have any suggestions that I could do to pay that off quicker than 30 years?
Honestly, you're going to have to budget as much as you possibly can. I might pull Jasmine into this if you've looked into income repayment plans based on how much you're going to be making whenever you get out of school, that you can lower those amounts right away until your income increases as you get older. Jasmine, do you have any other suggestions on that one?
Yeah, I would definitely, I would definitely ask your future employer as well. That's definitely a benefit that more employers are starting to include, is loan forgiveness or at least partial forgiveness. So in addition to working with the loan servicer, as we talked about, and making sure that you're keeping up with any regulations for any potential loan cancellation, you may want to work with your employer and then make sure you get set up on a payment plan. So once you're in repayment for your loans, as Amy said, you're going to need to reevaluate your budget sometime. So if you get an increase, see if you can start paying more towards your loans as well. But you'll have to take a multi-pronged approach at that one.
Okay. Thank you. Since we don't have a huge group here, I'm going to let students to unmute themselves if you want to ask our speakers questions. I also put the link of the evaluation form in the chat if you want to click and do that, or you can use your phone to scan the QR code, and we would appreciate your completing the evaluation for us and also for the speakers. Let me see if there are other questions in the chat. Yes. Are there any university resources for further information or personalized guidance?
You can always come to the Center for Financial Literacy and Education, but mainly we focus on doing presentations like this and educating students in more of a group setting. We haven't necessarily done anything one-on-one, but I'm happy to reach out to you and see if I could get you in touch with someone who may be able to help you on a personal level as well.
Thank you.
If that was specifically for the student loans, then you can call the Mountaineer Hub. We do assist with financial aid and student loans, but if you have questions specifically about investing, then you'll definitely want to work with the Center for Financial Literacy.
Okay. Let's see, there might be one more. Yeah. Do you recommend refinancing private loans like Sally Mae? An example would be like SOFI.
Yeah, it
yeah.
depends. It really depends on when that loan was originated and if you have multiple servicers. So if you do have multiple loan servicers, it may be in your best interest to refinance and to possibly consolidate. But if your loan was, if you have a private loan that was dispersed within the last year, your interest rate is probably going to be much lower. And then when your private loans are dispersed, you have that interest rate for the life of that loan. So I would probably have you give our office a call so we can talk about this more specifically, but it just depends on a number of factors there.
Okay. Amy, this question is for you. What would be the most important things to discuss with a financial advisor about wealth management and investing?
It depends on where you're at in your financial life cycle. I mean, it varies for everybody. You know, I have kids, so it's important to me to start saving for their education and saving for my retirement. But also, you know, if you're just now getting out of school, you might want to just start saving for a retirement and paying student loans down and that sort of thing. So it's really personal, and depending on what your situation is, on, you know, what type of risk you want to take with your investment. If you have quite a while to till you retire, you might want to invest in some more riskier options because you have longer to recoup that if they would somehow the market would tank or that sort of thing. So it just really depends on where you're at in your financial life cycle.
Okay, here's another one for you, Amy. How much extra income must be set aside in the example for a 30-year-old to catch up with the 25-year-old over a 5-year period?
I don't have that off the top of my head, but the main point of that is just to start investing as much as you can, as early as you can, you know, to meet your savings goals. So anything, even if you could only throw $50 in when you're 25, that's better than not throwing anything in until you hit 30 years old.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other questions? So, okay, I think there's one more here. Okay, that's not a question. It was a statement, yeah. All right, let's see. I don't see any more questions here. Okay, I don't see any more question in the chat. Earlier, there were students were asking if they could have your presentation or even some of those forms. They
Sure.
were asking. Okay, great. We'll send it to
Do you
them.
just want me to send them to you, Betty? And
Yeah,
then you can
yes.
disperse?
Yeah, we can do that.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, so here's the question. What type of investments are there?
Oh, so many different types. You know, you can invest in stocks, you can invest in bonds, you can invest in mutual funds, retirement plans, et cetera, et cetera. And like I told Betty at the start of this, many of you had investment questions, and you know, we might want to consider doing a second workshop just on investing in retirement, because you could talk for an hour about all of those things. And we felt like it was important just to focus on the basics for this first round. So that might be something that we look at, Betty.
Definitely. Students, if you're interested in finding out more about investments, yeah, we could have a second workshop. Now, here's one, maybe a simpler question for you to answer, Amy. Should graduate students have a Roth IRA?
It really just depends. So Roth IRAs actually have deferred tax. So you're the kicker about a Roth IRA is that normally your tax rate is going to be higher whenever you retire than it is now. So you're going to pay tax on that now when it goes in, but you're not going to pay tax on when you pull it out. So that's the advantage of a Roth IRA. So if you want to, that's great. I know a lot of people that max out the Roth IRAs every year. But then there are some other people who just have their employer sponsored contribution plans, like their 401ks, 403bs, that sort of thing. So it's really just personal preference as to what you want to do and how much you can save. There are a lot of people who don't have the option, they don't have the extra money to put into a Roth IRA every month. They only have what they can put in. You know, at WVU, we have a required match that we have to put 6% in, and some people can only put that in based on their budgets. They don't have the extra money to put into a Roth or a traditional IRA. So those are just different things to think about.
Okay. One more question here. Graduate students don't have access to those WV retirement plans, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right. So if students, if you would kindly leave your comments on the evaluation form or even email me so that we know your desire of, you want a second workshop, then Amy and we could work out another date, and so that then we can announce it to you for you to join. All right, if there are no further questions, let me see if there are any more. Just one last look at the chat room there. What about Bitcoin investing or mining?
That is not my area of expertise, so I'm going to defer on that one. We need to get Naomi Boyd in here. She is the investment expert.
Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. If there are no further questions, thank you all for coming. And again, if you haven't completed the evaluation, we would really appreciate it. Feel free to put your comments in there or email me afterwards. And thank you, speakers. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being here with us. Yes.
Thank you.
All right. I see a thank you note in the chat. Another one. Thank you.